Welcome to Origin Stories. I'm RD.
I'm Parrot.
We're telling stories behind the digital art revolution
Each week we interview top artists.
and live stream with the community.
Let's go. Today is tomorrow's origin story.
Justin Wetch, welcome to Origin Stories.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as you said off recording, almost 18 months since we've known each other. And now we get to do an origin story. I feel like we've been here before, but we haven't. But we get to spend a lot of time together. And now I'm excited for other people to get to spend a lot of time with you as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, a year and a half just after me and Chewy made that game, UPEKKHA.
And that was the first time I had ever heard of Justin Wetch, ever, was UPEKKHA. So what a great reference. Your joint super rare work. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about UPEKKHA later. Would love to dig into it a bit for people. Also the Artifex collaboration origin story and lots of other things. So
yeah,
let's start with this. Let's go a little bit further back than that though. Further back than our 18 months. Let me pose a question and take it anywhere you want to go. Justin Wetch, what is your origin story?
What's my origin story? Well, I'm from Alaska. That's a fun fact. I mean, I'm not just from there. I'm still here, unfortunately. I grew up in Alaska, so that's, defined a lot of the way that I am, I feel like. First artistic endeavors that I started taking part in, I think, was photography and poetry in like middle school. We had for poetry, we had a poetry slam event, and I'd always, I thought I hated poetry up until that point, but after that I started to, be open to it. And that ended up resulting in me first self-publishing and then being published, my first poetry book, and then the second one as well. And photography, my mom is a very good photographer, so I had a lot of help in that regard. But yeah, just making beautiful images, capturing the beauty that I see in the world through visuals and through words is a big part of who I am, I feel like. And that kind of went into 3D art as well. 3D art, I actually started wanting to learn 3D art because there's this Christian TV show for kids called The Veggie Tales. I think a lot of people may have heard of it, but it's 3D animated, and that was like my favorite show growing up, obviously, because I was raised extremely Christian. And they had like a behind the scenes where they showed the 3D program and like someone manipulating the rig of like Larry the Cucumber, and I was like, I want to do that. So I downloaded a copy of Maya, which is a 3D program, and I started learning. There were long periods of time where I didn't really touch 3D, but got really into it since probably around 2016, but like really into it since then. And then I started creating 3D art to the caliber that I feel like it's really good stuff, I think. So yeah, I mean, I make music as well. Really any kind of art or creative expression I find incredibly liberating and freeing, and like, just the flow state of creating things is constantly inspiring to me. So that's what I'd say my origin story is.
It's a wide-ranging origin story, and two things stood out to me right there. So we have Larry the Cucumber to thank for your 3D art enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And also you managed to incredibly subtly work in that you are a published poet. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Incredibly subtly. I just had to drop that in, make sure these people know. I self-published my first book called Bending the Universe. And I now see that as, obviously I wrote that from when I was like 15 to like 18. So, any work that you create that young, you're gonna like have differences with when you get older. I'm at the, you know, basically octogenarian at this point. I'm 25. So my my life is over. I've made my will and testament. No, I self-published that one in 2016, and then it kind of a couple of pieces went viral on Twitter and Instagram. So it ended up selling something like 10,000 copies or so until then the publisher that I'm, now signed to picked it up for distribution, which was really cool. Uh, being able to like go into a Barnes and Noble uh, in Hawaii, which, I went on vacation shortly after that happened, and I found it in Hawaii, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is actually real. So that was really cool. Yeah, and then the second one, called Our Naked Souls, was a book that I'm still very proud of. I think it's very good, in my opinion. It has a lot of great. Actually, I have a copy right here.
There it is.
But it has a lot of really great illustrations by my friend Travis Kalani in here. And I actually have a tattoo of one of them because it's just so good. That was actually my first tattoo.
I'm glad you worked this into your origin story. I mean, one, it obviously belongs. Two, it's a huge deal that you did that at such a young age, like that. Even though you say you're an octogenarian at 25 years old, but the fact that you were able to pull that off at such a young age, have the just the downright self-confidence to go out there and figure out how to self-publish a book at that age, I think is a huge deal. Then to see that catch traction, and then leverage that into a publishing deal, yeah, I mean, incredible.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, now part of me wishes I'd been a little less confident and like maybe kept it another year to like bake in the oven, but it's the cards are where they are. So
you could always write another one.
Yeah, I think I will.
Nice. Now, if and when you do, in the current plans, can you share whether that will be a book surrounding poetry? Will you go in another direction?
Oh no, I'd only do poetry. If I were going to do anything narrative, I'd want to do like a script or something for like a TV show.
Nice. No, so all of this diversity of experience, you mentioned that kind of if there's an art, you create within it, and anything from the poetry to music to 3D art, how has it all informed your time? I mean, I guess I am skipping ahead. I'm kind of leading us to the NFT space a little bit, but how has it informed much of the art that we see from you within the NFT space? Let me frame it that way.
How is what framed what we see for me in the NFT space?
How is the diversity of your creative experience and your creative backgrounds, the fact that you write, the fact that you create music, the fact that you have experience in multiple art disciplines, how does that inform what you've done, within just the NFT space?
I would say it gives me the advantage of vertical integration, or holistic integration. Like if I were just a 3D artist, then like say the Mystics release, for instance, I made this interactive 3D gallery experience where people could come in and it's a beautiful world and they can see the art and see the backstory to the pieces. And there's like an AR function where you can scan a QR code and it'll open it, on your phone if you have an iPhone. So things like that, like the just cross-discipline things that, if you were just one of those things, just a video game designer or just, a 3D artist, then you never would have thought to integrate those things. Or, the music that's in it, although that was done by my brother, John, in this case, because he had made like a really great, like peaceful vibes track that I was just like, oh, this is actually perfect for this. I really think the biggest influence, I would say, well, two things I would say. First is just like from poetry, I would say comes the experience of like really being able to like look into my own self and like pull out different nuggets of truth or experience or things that are meaningful to me and like turn them into something that's digestible by other people, and like being able to finally control uh, the nuance to which, you know, my original vision is portrayed or not, like how uh you know, how obvious do you want to be, and like maybe if it's a more sensitive subject you might obfuscate a little bit more through art. Like I said on the Discord call, uh whenever that was, earlier this week, uh like I feel like art simultaneously reveals and obfuscates the truth. So as artists, uh you know, we're sharing these like deeply vulnerable parts of ourselves, but because they are, you know, deeply vulnerable parts of ourselves, they're, through the language and medium of art, you know, obfuscated and like diffracted like a light ray, I would say. um yeah, and then from photography, I think photography really influences my approach to, you know, 3D work. Like if you think of an artist like Chewy, our mutual friend.
Chewy Stoll, by the way, for folks
Yeah,
out
yeah,
there.
yeah, the great Chewy Still. He has what I would describe as a graphical approach to his art and compositions, whereas I have sort of a photographic approach. Like I approach these 3D scenes like I'm taking a picture, you know, of a world that's like, um, you know, it's believable as it is a world, and as this is how you would see it if you were there. Whereas Chewy like will create compositions and things that are focused on, you know, uh, like the final form of it. Like the perspective might be orthographic instead of, you know, natural perspective. Um, and he focuses on, um, I feel like Bill Ellis does this a lot too, where it's like the with the graphical approach to composition. And that's kind of actually something that I've been trying to learn from a lot, like especially in Mystics versus like some of my earlier 3D work. I was trying to take a page from that kind of graphical approach to composition. But, you know, I still think there's a lot of validity in my own, you know, sort of photography based approach, where I really do enjoy as part of the process, like showing, like, since I know so much about photography and about color grading and especially film emulation, like I really enjoy shooting on film. So I've adapted a lot of, you know, stuff I've seen about film emulation to my 3D work. Like there's this guy Steve Yedlin who's a Hollywood cinematographer, but he's done some incredible dissertations on the science behind film emulation and proved empirically that you can do it. Like essentially make something that was shot on digital indistinguishable from something that's shot on film if it's done correctly. So I've adapted a lot of what he shared about that to my 3D art, and like this is how this would look, you know, if this 3D world, which has no basis in reality, had been shot on an analog medium, which I think is something that's, you know, I'm not the only person who tries to do that, but I'm definitely the only person who does it in a way that's like scientifically valid. So
Well, that's one of the things, and I told you this recently, but it's one of the things I find most fascinating is whenever we've gotten into discussions about your artwork, the layers of depth of thoughtfulness, but behind multiple aspects of it are pretty amazing. And I'm sure that exists for a number of people out there, but I found it pretty captivating. Like when we got into the weeds on certain things, and yeah, and maybe we can get to some of those things today as well. But let's frame it up so we can start talking about some of your specific artwork. So I think that would be helpful. How did you hear about NFTs, and how did you decide how to enter the space with an actual minted artwork?
My first hearing about NFTs was through my friend Connor, who was also an Alaskan artist. That we kind of came up in similar circles with photography. And he was, I'm not sure if it's true, but he says that he was one of the first like people who really did photography and NFTs. So from him, I was like, oh, okay, this is like a thing that people are doing, and it's not just like, you know, when someone you know does something, it's a lot different than just seeing other people doing it. You know, so I started thinking, and obviously for me, my first kind of thoughts on NFTs was like there were cool mechanics that you could do that would make art like um actually interactive in a way that it had never been able to be before. So that was, you know, I saw the potential in that, but also just for, you know, sharing as if it's just an art gallery uh is also cool. Like you don't have to do anything crazy. It can just be art is what I'm saying. Um let's see. The first one, the first NFT I ever minted was this 3D video I made of an astronaut and an alien smoking weed together on the moon. Which has, you know, um, I ended up burning that one.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I do not know about this artwork. Where does it exist? You burned it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a copy somewhere, but I mean, it was cool. It was just kind of I had made the decision to kind of go a more serious direction with the art, and I felt like you kind of have to choose a lane. Um, uh, which is, you know, maybe true, maybe not true, but it seems like it's a lot easier to get anywhere if you do choose a lane and stick to it. Um, but yeah, then the next one was my ephemeral mind piece, which is there's a brain coming out of a skull and a skeleton, and there's mushrooms growing on it. And that was actually inspired by the feeling of ego death that I experienced on mushrooms.
Is that before abduction?
Yes. I'm 95% sure. I'm so incredibly sure. I'm not looking it up right now, if that's what you're thinking that I'm doing.
We're gonna crack this code.
We're gonna find out somewhere in it. No, you're right. Actually, abduction was first. Wait, let me double check. May 5th versus May 14th. That was like a week between them. So
all right, fair enough. But those are your first two works, both, fun fact, collected by Cactus.
yeah, who has since kind of disappeared, I feel like, but you know, teach their own.
Yeah, we hope you're well, Sir Cactus, wherever you are. Has an incredible portfolio of artwork.
Yeah,
including Justin Wetch's first two NFTs.
Yeah. The abduction one, the abduction one's pretty self-explanatory. It's just an astronaut being abducted by a UFO. But this one, you know, just the atmospherics that are in this one, like it takes place in a field, so there's like dust particles from the ground that are actually simulated, you know, as a result of, like, you know, this astronaut being levitated. Obviously you'd expect like sand particles, dust particles, all that, like movement in the air, lens flares, that kind of thing. I feel like this was kind of seminal to me in developing the visual language of my 3D art. And not everything I make is like sci-fi, but it has a very sci-fi aesthetic, I feel, that I kind of keep returning to.
And in that sense, I mean, ephemeral mind exists a little bit outside of that, because when we run down your foundation page, at least, you know, you can look at abduction, you can look at the gardener, which I think is amazing, which I also believe is over your, yeah, there it is. There's the gardener. Incredible. Boom. The survivor, and then alchemy of the damned. Ephemeral mind seems to exist a little bit outside of that in terms of appearance.
It's very naturalistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one I pursued a very naturalistic visual language because, you know, with shrooms, I feel like you're very much communing with nature. So to that extent, I also feel like when you have like exotic subject matter, it kind of helps to ground it in a more uh naturalistic visual language, because if people have to understand both, exotic subject matter and exotic presentation, then I feel like we're already in like a losing position in terms of being understood at all. um Not that the goal of art is to be understood, but the goal of art that you want to be understood should include being understood, you know. So yeah, that one, um I'm still very proud of that one because so many, probably multiple hundreds of hours involved in this one. And I really do like creating you know, works that feel sort of seminal, sort of like important, or um like a magnum opus.
Mm-hmm. I think it's up there for me in terms of favorite Justin Wetch artworks, but I think it forever has to take second place at its highest, because I think what the all-timer is, which is our origin story, which is how I first came to find out about you to begin with, and that was your collaboration piece with Chewy Stoll. I mean, grand in what it is, because it constituted an entire playable Unreal scene over on Super Rare. It's under for those looking, under Chewy Stoll's account, but a collaboration between the two of you. I mean, can you
And
talk
the
about
fucker
that?
still won't let me on, but continue.
Come on, Super Rare.
Just
Come on, Super
kidding.
Rare.
It's fine. I'm not bitter, Super Rare.
You're gonna go the paper Buddha route, and it will take you how many days? It was hundreds of days, but you'll get there. You'll get there eventually. I mean, you're already on there, and so it's just a matter of time until you have
For
your own
real,
account.
like I'm already on
Yeah.
there. Like just let me on, guys.
And UPEKKHA at the time, and in some ways still now, like was and is incredibly unique in its scope and its presentation. Can you talk about that and what went into it?
Right. It may have been one of the first open world um games on the blockchain, but I have not verified that. I just think that's true.
I mean, certainly, like, yeah, I think it's hard to claim first, because out there in some, in some corner, like there of course is a chance that there were other open worlds created. However, what I will say, at the time I was doing a lot of collecting and I had my eyes absolutely everywhere. That was still, that's a hat tip and an ode to the era of NFTs, when you could be everywhere. You could really conceptualize what was going on all of the existing platforms at the time. And I will say that I was blown away when I saw it. And when you really dig in and understand what it is and what's behind it, and the fact that it is an entire world that the two of you created, I had not seen anything quite like it at the time. And so, yes, we can't sit here and say it was the first, but I can say optically, on a platform like Super Rare, thrust into the public eye, it was new and it was fresh.
Yeah, I really think so. Yeah, UPEKKHA means equanimity, which is, to simplify it, is like an ultimate state of peace that you would associate with meditation, which was essentially the goal of the experience. Was like, when, I don't know about everyone else, when I try to meditate, I try to meditate thinking about like an imagined lush, amazing, beautiful world, um, that like inspires that feeling of peacefulness. So it was really a mission of just translating that, like, well, what do I think about when I try to go there in my mind, and like try to bring that back to like an experience that other people can walk through, which is really cool because there's 9 different floating islands in UPEKKHA that each have different characteristics, different themes, different lore and backstory. We actually spent a lot of time developing like a whole backstory that just never really got represented in the actual game, but was very crucial to development. But there's like a whole lore and like um, world backstory, world building that was involved in all of that. But there's, different temples, and like there's mysteries that you can get a sense of there. Um, and you can do shrooms in the game, so that's fun. It just cuts to like a really shitty animation of like someone moving their hand, like a first person animation with shrooms on it, because I didn't you know, wasn't able to like get an animation from animating it in like Maya to like into Unreal at the time, which is funny. My efforts were focused elsewhere. Like, relax. No. But it's just like, and then it triggers like a really cool like psychedelic effect. So, but yeah, still very very proud of what was accomplished in UPEKKHA. Chewy did the statues that are in the world, and uh, there's one enormous statue that's at the center of it all with a temple on top of it that you can, that's my favorite spot to meditate in the world. I think there's these platforms that are programmed so when you go on them you can press the interact button, which is E, and then you'll start floating in like a lotus pose, and there's like magic circles that are going on, and it's very cool.
in in some ways, I mean, it's not the origin story to Artifex, but the direction of Artifex to push into Unreal Engine 5 specifically. I mean, the UPEKKHA itself, you know, at the time, I will say I wanted to be on the bleeding edge of pushing visuals within the NFT space, and wasn't quite like we had built the aesthetic site and still wasn't quite satisfied with the, you know, the peak experience of the art itself. And so I was very interested in that bleeding edge. And I remember seeing UPEKKHA, and it was a magnetizing force of saying like, okay, I want to explore what this is, and had known Chewy a little bit at the time, but you know, that was when we got to talking.
Oh yeah, yeah. Chewy is a lot of fun. I quote unquote met him when he had 400 followers on Twitter, and now he has 54,000. So, you know, just a cool 50K plus. In, you know,
as we like to call him, Chewy Viral Stole.
yeah, yeah. He gets a new like middle name, nickname like every couple weeks around here. It's just part of the creative process.
How was it taking, so creating UPEKKHA, like you said, not 9 different mini worlds within pretty grand endeavor for a super rare one of one, probably one of the most high effort super rare one of ones ever created. How did it feel, you know, going from there and then diving into the Artifex universe and beginning a different phase of world building?
Right. The biggest difference is, I think, going from representing your own work to representing other people's work, which is, you know, it's its own struggle, but it's also a very interesting and rewarding one for me, because I find like, because the caliber of artists at Artifex is so high, it's not like you're just like have to collaborate with some randos who don't know what they're doing. It's like very high scale like artists who know what the fuck they're doing. And so being able to like interface with them and like expand on their creative vision and bring it into an interactive 3D space, it's like a very interesting challenge to undergo.
So like from your perspective, of course, not to the exclusion of anyone, but can you, maybe 2 examples of worlds for whatever reason come to mind now, and you know, maybe give a quick anecdote or 2 about them?
Right. There's so many good ones, honestly. The first one, well, I mean, the first one that we ever made was Chewy's room. So that was really cool, being able to like blow up his vision for his one of one into like a space that you could uh walk around in, which is fairly literal in this case, because we kept the same, there's like a central character in the middle, and there's a face in the upper right, and there's something else I don't remember at this moment in the like lower left. And so that's like exactly represented, that you can walk around in Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
But that one was a lot of fun, and I think really set the bar on what we could do for an artist, because you know, obviously Chewy also works here, so you know, it was easy to get time with him to like flesh out this vision and be like, all right, this is the bar for like to help artists understand like what we can do for them in Unreal Engine. I mean, Raf Grassetti is an obvious one. Extraordinarily talented sculptor. And it was funny, he sent a couple of reference images at first, and I actually ended up tracking down exactly where they were from to a studio in Italy, and was able to get a lot more reference pictures. We actually ended up basing the architecture of that scene very heavily on the real space, which is always fun to do. But I feel like that lends it a lot of authenticity and authentic details that otherwise it would not have felt exactly like a real marble atelier would. Is it atelier or atelier? I don't know, but someone will know.
I go atelier, and I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, we'll just go with that. Yeah. No, who's gonna stop us? You know. The Josh Pierce one was also great because it's kind of close to the spirit that we were in when we were creating UPEKKHA, which was like meditative. You're in nature and a little bit of magicality to it. Like there's a meditation stone in Josh Pierce's experience that when you stand on it plays music that he created, which is also cool when you have other artists to collaborate with who are multidisciplinary, I guess. Because like Josh also creates music, so to be able to work with another artist who's, has that same vertical integration approach was very cool. That's what I found really inspiring about Josh's piece and the familiar subject matter of like meditation. But of course, you also gotta. I mean, there's so many great ones. Aphoria, that one wasn't with Artifex, but that was a incredibly special experience to get to work with him on the interactive gallery for his Eras experience. But yeah, Micah Johnson's room. I just the IQ brand is great, and I think 10 years from now it's going to be a massive franchise for sure. So it's going to be cool. I mean, he's already reached an incredible level of success, but what's certain to come from my perspective makes that interesting as well. But as far as a story from that goes, like, I had the idea of like, I wanted him, because Aku's like at his desk, so I wanted him to like kind of get back a little bit and then swirl around in the chair and then go back in, because I felt like that was a really great like character moment to have going on that made this feel like a really authentic and like lived in world, which is kind of central to my approach to trying to create these worlds, is like making them feel like this is a very lived in world. But yeah, originally we had planned to have someone from the Aku team do that animation, but they ended up not being available, so I just brewed a bunch of coffee and stayed up all night and like got that animation done. I had to like I took a video recording of myself doing that motion, which is very funny. But I think it's not the greatest animation in the world, but it really it gets the point across.
The funny, that story from reverse perspective, from my perspective, I get to crack up about that too, because really so much love went in from both sides, from the Aku side and all the assets they brought over, from the Artifex side, what you and Chu were able to do in there, and Dirk as well. But there were already animations in there. There was already the footfalls and the lighting outside the door. There was already the rain and the ambiance outside. There was plenty going on. And so when it came down to it, I remember, I think I was going to sleep and waking up not expecting that an Aku animation would be in there, because we had learned that it wasn't possible from that end. And then I do remember I wish I had the exact quote, but paraphrased, it was, quote, just put another cup of coffee on and got it done. And that was a pretty cool moment.
Well, yeah, when you have like that level of effort from everyone involved, and it's like such a special experience, it's like you just gotta like bring it to its potential. because anything less would be a disservice to the subject material.
Yeah, and I think people
But
really enjoy it.
yeah,
Well worth it.
the Jonathan Wolf one was also very special, incredibly nice guy to work with. But just because that one was more, obviously he creates a kind of cartoon-ish style with his drawings. So to like, I think that was the first one where I'm pretty sure it's the first one where we like really tried to do, well, the other ones are pretty realistic aesthetic or semi-realistic. So this one being like a cartoon one that, you feel like you're actually inside of one of his drawings is like very cool to me as well. And the animations of his different characters and the cats, it's like just a lot of fun to work with, and I feel like that's a very unique one. But the list goes on and on, like the Brian Brinkman room, incredibly cool, incredibly special. Dave Krugman's Verona's is a very beautiful room, and then Tommy Wilson, the first cyberpunk one we did. I mean, there's just an incredible amount of like special experiences.
Yeah, even Matt Caesar is set in the sort of the classic Artifex Unreal backdrop. Just the fact that I feel like Bones is able to live in there, seeing what Matt's gone on to do after that release. He's done some amazing stuff in the interim.
Oh yeah, speaking of like artists who have really advanced since we've worked with them, Tommy Wilson's gotten crazy good. Because I mean, not to say that he wasn't good before, but he he felt that he was still in like the infancy of his artistic expression compared to like the sports world that he came from at the time that we worked with him on this interactive world. And then where he's grown to since then has been pretty extraordinary to witness.
Agree. And that big shout out to Tommy, because that's always someone who has said, I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to work my ass off, and I'm motivated and inspired to do this and to get better. And it's not the same thing, but you look at a discipline like baseball to get to the level that he's at, pushing the envelope on the majors. That's a big deal, and that takes a lot of work, day in, day out, week in, week out. And he's really applied that same approach to art, and he has a creative soul to him. So it's come together beautifully.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%.
So Justin, let's go from the Artifex world and focusing on a lot of other artists' artworks back to your artwork. I want to talk about your Mystics release, because I thought that was just such a well-constructed, cohesive release. It had the overarching experience to it. I think you said your brother's music was brought into that experience. You had some AR elements to that release, and then you had the artworks that I remember rolled out for auction. And I think they were all concluding over one mega 48-hour type stretch. But can you take us back through the history of Mystics?
Right. It's started off as a conversation with Josh Teplitz, who is a very talented photographer. And I was just kind of sharing some, aesthetic changes that weren't really, familiar to my existing work. I was just kind of like getting some feedback. Same with Oswaldo Capita, who's also an incredibly talented photographer you may know as Moody Darkroom. But anyway, just sort of their feedback inspired me to keep moving in this aesthetic direction. And at that point, I didn't really have the soul of the collection. I feel like, well, I wouldn't say I didn't have it as much as I didn't understand it, because you can create from a certain place or a certain inspiration without necessarily understanding that that's what you're doing, which I feel like a lot of collections or poetry books or anything, you just have to start like creating, and then after a while I think maybe the central ideas become more clear to you, or to me. I don't know if that's anyone else's experience. But Mystics, I came to find out, was about reconnecting with spirituality, because I grew up in, as I alluded to before, a very Christian household, which is putting it mildly. It's more of a Pentecostal cult. Um, you know, every word of the Bible is literally true. The world is 4,000 years old. The world is flat. We never went to the moon. Is alt-right. They were QAnon before QAnon was a thing. Yeah, so that kind of, I would say, understandably pushed me away from any semblance of spirituality in my life, because freedom to me felt like being completely apart from that in every way. And then through therapy, through working on things, through psychedelics, I would say mostly, because I do believe firmly in the healing power of psychedelics, especially when it comes to trauma, because the disconnect that it allows you to have, disconnecting from being the person who experienced something and viewing it externally and seeing like, oh, this is me thinking that I had achieved freedom by just doing the opposite of what I'd grown up with. Highly I wouldn't say scientific, because I still obviously very much believe in science, but non like being like, this material world is all there is, there's nothing else to the human experience. And psychedelics allowed me to see that this was a response to how I'd been raised, and it was not necessarily who I am or what I believe, or necessarily an approach to life that would be healthy for me going forward. So yeah, that allowed me to reconnect with like different layers of spirituality, and I wanted to explore those through the Mystics collection. So each of these different pieces is like results from me like plumbing the depths of my soul, trying to like find these different um you know motifs or different small scenes that I would then turn into like a piece in this collection. Like the meditation one is probably the most easy to understand what I'm saying there, because um it's kind of just a visual representation of like where my mind goes when I'm meditating. And if you look at the piece, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. But like the dreaming piece that you own, which is one of the best in the collection, I think.
He said
Is
it, not
also
me.
yeah, exactly. Is
Mystics.art, by the way, right? Mystics.art.
yeah, which I was shocked was available, but
It's a good get.
yeah, like the dreaming one is also as close to literal as the collection gets, I think. But one's like subconscious is it's difficult to describe, but there's sort of this structure that's composed entirely of human forms in different poses. So it's architecture made of human forms. There's nothing in the scene that isn't made out of a human form. So and also just like doing little challenges like that is a lot of fun. But the poly count in this one was like completely insane. um but as for the meaning, just like really meditating on the idea of a subconscious, of like a mind beneath the mind that in some ways controls us, in some ways we control. So to me, that became this kind of nexus temple in sort of an ethereal, astral, strange, somewhat underwater looking like world. And there's just a lot of layers of meaning into each and every one of these pieces that's incredibly meaningful to me, and to the experience and the process of healing is never complete, but as far as what I've gone through, experienced all of that, I feel like it was very cathartic to like represent what I've gone through and what I see in myself through different pieces of art like this.
Would highly recommend to everyone check it out. So mystics.art, because I think it I don't know, it felt like something you'd worked on for quite some time and put a lot of thought into his presentation, which I appreciate, and I think a lot of people do. So we had seen some our friend Cyanok was one of my favorites, but we saw some people within the community sort of gravitate to the collection, pick up one or in his case a few, and I think we all share the same belief that it's one of those gems out there. I mean, sometimes Justin Wetch is you have a humble side to you in the NFT community, so you gotta shout loud and proud about what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the lessons I still have to learn is like, you can't, if you want people to see what you're doing, you can't just like, it would be nice if the idea that you could just make great art and the audience would find it was still true, but I don't think that really is true anymore. So finding my place in a world where that's true is difficult, but I'm working on it.
Well, with that in mind, and just leaning into a new piece of artwork, right? That's kind of going out at relatively the same time as this Origin Stories episode, or I guess technically one day later. But to talk about UFO Junkyard.
Yeah. Going from I do really like making art that's like, as I said, like a piece of your soul is in each one. But sometimes a piece of your soul is not related to a specific trauma. It's just like something that you're fascinated by or you just love. So sci-fi world building has always been that to me. Like ever since I was a kid, I just was always obsessed with the minutia of different science fiction universes. And I often found like some of the more day-to-day mundane things were interesting because I always thought it was fascinating that someone would think with, there's kind of like a godlike creativity to that, to create an entire world from the smallest details being thought out, world building like that. So that's kind of a mindset that I get into sometimes when I'm creating specifically my science fiction works. And so the UFO Junkyard one comes from that place where it's like, if you think about, for every utopian city with flying cars and like, incredibly advanced technology and all that, there's garbage disposal systems. There's systems where people and goods and services have to get from place to place. So to me, those kind of like mundane details are really interesting. And in this case, it was like, well, you have all these different, spaceships and stuff. You think about what happens, in this world, and eventually once those cars in this world have reached the end of their usefulness and their lives, and they're like disassembled or tried to recycle or compressed into boxes. So, you kind of think like, well, what does that look like, in this sort of imagined world that I'm creating? And that was really just an excuse for me to really flesh out and like go to an insane level of detail with that idea of like, oh, well, you would need a junkyard for for this world where there's all these spaceships. They're gonna run out of their usefulness and they're gonna be disassembled. And yeah, just I often find for me that creating art based on like things that people don't usually think of about world building is a very interesting exercise for me personally. And so you might just look at this and be like, oh, that's cool, but it's also, for me, comes from a place of like uh what I really appreciate about when people create worlds for the enjoyment of others, which is like this has been thought through down to the smallest detail. And like, not to say that nothing is ever out of place, but like there's, at least in a general sense, you've thought through everything about, the implications of the things that you create in a world. But this one was very fun as well because, we have a bit of an inside joke about how often I bring up Houdini, which is a very powerful piece of 3D software. You can basically do anything, and it gets used a ton in everything that we do at Artifex Unreal. But in my own art, in this case, it was very fun to create a system, basically to create variations of these different spaceships, because you could do each one by hand, but proceduralism is an interesting exercise for me and also creates better results, I feel. So I created a procedural system to take like the shell that I would hand model, the outer exterior of the spaceship, and it would generate sort of a frame system and skeleton and pipes and wires and different randomly placed or not placed antennas, boxes, greeblies. I don't know if that's how you say that, but and so yeah, and it would randomly destroy parts of the shell so that like that those internals would be exposed. And so no two of these ships are identical in this piece, even though there's I don't even remember how many, but at least dozens upon dozens of unique individual spaceships in here.
That's what I'm so glad you shared that. It's probably my favorite story contained in that artwork.
Yeah, and there's also inspired by I think Chewy suggested this, but because I was getting his feedback on an early draft of this, and he was like, "You should put some cats in there," and I was like, "That's genius." Chewy always has such interesting suggestions for art, like in the Mystics one. Just to briefly go on a tangent here, the Journey of the Soul one, where it's like an ice cave and there's a character, and then there's just this giant hand on the other side that's like iridescent and like reaching, and it's like, oh, that's perfect, that like completes the message of the piece. There's also like 30 different hands that are like hidden in the piece, just by the way. Fun fact. I'm a big fan of hiding things in pieces so people who spend more time looking at a piece will be rewarded for their effort. And there's different layers of detail and meaning that you'll find in every single one of my pieces if you look long enough. But for this one, as I was saying about Chewy, like he actually just was like, "You should just put a giant hand there," and I was like, "You're a fucking genius." No, he legitimately, like, he's very unassuming about the way that he like says and suggests things, but he always has very interesting ideas that like complete a piece. But in the case of the UFO Junkyard one, I really enjoyed his suggestions of just having like cats everywhere, because like, yeah, you'd have, just like in the real world, there's junkyard dogs in the real world, but like there's different birds and cats and a few other animals scattered around here as well, just to add that extra layer of realistic detail.
I love it, man. You and Chewy, the dynamic duo.
Indeed.
Justin Wetch, want to play the lightning round?
Oh, this is the part where we both get canceled, but yeah. I'm ready. This is your problem.
All right. Hot takes. First thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
If you get fired up and inspired, you want to hit timeout and go on a tangent, of course, you're more than welcome to. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. First thing that comes to mind when I say Chewy Stoll.
Chewy Stoll, the modern Dali.
Dirk at work.
Dirk at work. Meticulous and creative.
Let's go big picture. NFTs.
NFTs. Perceived negatively by the public to a large degree, and there isn't really anyone who speaks the language of the public who is going to be able to tell the truth about the potential of this technology. So in a sense, I feel like we're waiting for communicators who can really like speak the language of ordinary people and dissuade from some of the kind of outlandish arguments that are currently the basis of people's negative perception.
Ethereum,
the best cryptocurrency.
Oh, All right, let's keep it rolling. Let's go to some disciplines. Poetry, first thing that comes to mind.
Poetry, most of it is garbage.
Photography.
Photography. What do I think about photography? It makes me, the first thing I think about, honestly, is I appreciate the fact that film has come back and has become really popular with young people, because I feel like connecting with the analog roots of the medium can be really helpful to the development of a photographer or really any artist. And not having the instantaneous feedback might also create, space for, because you're not going to see the result of the picture for like maybe months, as is often the case for me, because I usually collect like 6 to 10 rolls before I have them developed or develop them myself. So I feel like that makes me think of like, that's a really powerful tool for seeing your art with new eyes, in a way that you don't with digital approach to photography.
Houdini.
The most powerful software, and used by the best people, and it's you're automatically better than everyone else if you use it.
Psychedelics.
Psychedelics, I would say healing, but I also think that some people who kind of use them recreationally are kind of playing with fire, and it's I don't know, to me, just they're such powerful tools for like medicinal mental health healing, things like that. So to me, when people just like kind of just use them for fun, I don't know, I might be kind of like um a bit harsh of a perspective, but I don't know, it just seems kind of disrespectful to me, to like the power of psychedelics and what they can do. But I guess, to each their own.
Artifex.
Artifex is the company Web3 with the largest amount of integrity and an incredible collection of artists who are all A players, and the team is good.
The artist who's already released through Artifex that you haven't built an Unreal experience for, that you would be, just off the top, not to the exclusion of anyone that you don't mention, but just someone who comes to mind that you'd be really enthused to dig in with?
I'd have to say Trevino.
Robbie Trevino.
Yeah, because he's an incredible artist, incredible concept artist, and I feel like he would have some really interesting touches in the realm of like sci-fi and stuff that I would really have a lot of fun implementing and collaborating with.
Love that. The last artwork that you laid eyes on in the NFT space that made your jaw drop?
Made my jaw drop. Let me just look through my saved folder on Twitter, because I will just see what the last one I saved was, because that would be the answer.
It's a good reference.
For real. I see a lot of stuff by Samantha Cavett that I really like. Oh, there's this artist named Storm who's very good, who got into NFTs recently. Who I tried to get her on Foundation like over a year ago, but she just never got into it. But she recently did, and now she's on Super Rare and is like one of their top selling artists now.
Oh wow.
So
you knew?
Yeah. No, dude, for real. Me with these artists, I always know. Like Chewy, for instance, Travis, this painter called Craven, who's an incredible artist. I own an original of hers that is very good. She also blew up. Mad World was already successful when I found out about her, but also very good. Adewale Mayowa, incredible artist who was another one that I found early who I just knew was going to succeed. And of course, Chewy stole because, 400. I even told him at the time, like, hey, you're going to be huge in this amount of time. And he exceeded my estimations of where he would be. Like, I think I told him by a specific day he would have 10,000 and he had like 13,000 at that
There
time.
you go. And now he's
So
well on his way.
Yeah. So I feel like I always can tell when an artist is going to is really going to blow up. Or
I
should.
attribute it to your experiences with Houdini, clearly.
Yes, there's actually a node in Houdini that will tell you if an artist is going to blow up or not. Little known fact.
We passed the lightning round with flying colors. Well done, sir.
Hey, we didn't get canceled. I don't think I said anything that controversial.
But as we start to wrap up, the question I like to ask, and take it in any direction you want. Sometimes I'll frame it in terms of years. I think that's a tough endeavor. I would usually do that within the lightning round just to get snap reactions. But just take it more macro take. What's next? How would you frame up the next chapter of your experience, either within the NFT space or if you did want to touch on anything outside of it? What's next?
Word. I think the theme of my life, this chapter of my life, I would say is really meeting my potential and overcoming any limitation that I have, self-imposed or otherwise. As you know, I haven't really talked about this publicly, but I am very close to having lost 100 pounds since the beginning of this year. 94 so far. So that's
huge. Congrats. That is no small endeavor.
Pun intended. Yeah. But yeah, so that has kind of given me the confidence to very, in a real sense, be like, oh, I really can do anything. And I will do everything. Everything I want in this life will be mine.
Let's go, Justin Wetch. That's the quote right there. That's the quote.
No, honestly though, from, it's made me realize that I don't have to settle for anything in this life, for any set of circumstances or anything. I can change anything and everything, and I will.
It's the most powerful mindset out there. And I have full belief in Justin Wetch. Any discipline you pursue, multidiscipline, I think is probably in your future to some extent, but I cannot wait to see what's around the corner.
Well, thank you. Me too.
And where should people look? So where should people find you, contact you, what have you?
I would say don't contact me.
Okay. So I'm getting the sense that if we kept this thing going for 20 more minutes, cancellation would be around the corner.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's inevitable.
Wheels are starting to come off.
No, I'm kidding. I do enjoy talking to people. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Justin Wetch. On the topic of the previous thing, just randomly thought I do want to do more blends of live action and 3D stuff, because I did one just over a year ago that I thought was very good with a friend of mine.
The train.
The cyberpunk train. I want to do more stuff like that, I feel like, but that's very difficult to do, so we'll see. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So
to get back to where can people find you? Don't contact you, but
no, you can contact me if you're cool.
Justin Wetch on Twitter. Let me step in here.
No, for real though. Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, Justin Wetch. I'm on Foundation and OpenSea.
Mystics.art.
Yeah. You can find me if you really try.
Okay. Much like your artworks. Go the layer deeper, people. Get in there, zoom. The Easter eggs are waiting for you.
Oh, and buy my second poetry book, but not the first one.
Don't you dare buy his first book.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's a pleasure. Past 18 months have been glorious in their own right. Been really, really honored. It's been a privilege again to be able to work with you, man, and create some really, really special stuff together. And love your artwork, as you know, and this step of UFO Junkyard, and then next steps, and just seeing where you go, and that powerful line that you dropped. I truly believe you are someone who's capable of doing anything and will do whatever you want. So we're here for it. Got the popcorn ready. And now before cancellation ensues. And I did. Oh, you know what I forgot to bring up at some point. Speaking of popcorn ready, is your specialty, your egg, avocado, and gluten-free toast special. It always makes me jealous on meetings.
Oh yeah. Every time we do a meeting, I've got one of those keto avocado sliders ready. Very
Always looks brilliant, man. And big congrats again. 94 on the road to 100.
On the way to 100. Next thing you know, I'll weigh a negative weight.
Our dog in the background is cheering for you, by the way. I don't know if you can hear him coming through on the mic. Yeah. So
tell him I appreciate that.
All right, will do. Justin Wetch, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm sure we'll be back at a future date for a milestone origin story. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.